Bret Baier's on the line from the Fox News Channel. How are you, Bret?
Hey, Brian, Dan, good morning.
Hey, Bret.
I want to start out by talking. I've seen this being reported quite a bit on Fox News. It has to do with this FCC effort to get into newsrooms around the country and find out a little bit about how they choose the stories that they cover. What's your thought about that?
Yeah, I think that this study looking for, I think it was critical information. It was a study that the FCC put out. From what I could gather from the commissioner's statement yesterday, Commissioner Wheeler, they are trying to walk this thing back.
I wonder why.
It just got so much attention from both sides of the aisle that it was this ominous kind of first camel's nose in the tent of government going into newsrooms. And frankly, it scared a lot of people. And I doubt that this is going to go forward. I doubt that it's going to move forward. How it got to this point to begin with is pretty astonishing.
Well, if it hadn't been for that Republican commissioner on the FCC, we wouldn't have known about it.
Yeah. If you look at the study, how it's written, it is a little vague and kind of nebulous. And the contractor who's been hired to do it has no experience in news at all, none. It's a substance abuse contractor, and you just don't even understand how this all happens. We can't get a total dollar figure for how much this study was supposed to have cost, but I bet you see the House of Representatives act on it pretty soon.
All right, thanks.
Well, Bret, with the camel's nose under the tent, I don't think that's that uncommon with the administration. Even with the IRS controversy we had with the targeting, you now see these new IRS rules being proposed, which would essentially just codify what they did before. And the pushback on that's pretty substantial, too. But it doesn't seem to stop the administration from constantly poking the camel to poke his nose under the tent.
Yeah, no, you're right there. And on the IRS, I mean, you have people like Senator Chuck Schumer saying more needs to be done on those fronts. So you're right. They're kind of different animals, I think. But, who knows? This FCC thing could be, the start of a broader plan. I think it's just dangerous to go from, concerning to sinister in one jump.
Yeah. Hey, about Ukraine, a lot of fighting and a lot of people have lost their life there in these clashes between the protesters and the Putin-connected government in Ukraine. The United States, I get the sense that the administration is sort of casting about, not quite sure what they should do, that they want to be helpful to the protesters, but it's not real clear how they can be.
Right. I mean, this is a mess. This thing, Brian, is, from all that we can tell, is kind of unraveling over there. There are towns along the Polish border that have overthrown lawmakers tied to the Ukrainian president, and there's a lot of fighting that's still going on. This truce has been instituted, taken off, and now they're supposedly talking about it again. It doesn't seem like the U.S. has a lot of influence in that sphere anymore, and Putin does.
Yeah, and how do you think the vice president apparently involved in this deeply? What can the United States do?
I think that there's only so much we can do. But working with the EU, there's sanctions possibilities. There's diplomatic outreach possibilities. But when the president said there will be consequences for the Ukrainian government if they continue to crack down with this violence, critics push back to Syria and the consequences of the red line if Syria crossed the red line of chemical weapons. And I think there are people wondering where the consequences lie.
There's also a really interesting survey out this morning, or I guess it's an analysis that's done by Sean Trendy over at Real Clear Politics, in which he says that, if you look at it and you use as the major factor here that elections, midterm elections, are often sort of a referendum on the president that's in power at the time. He comes up with some pretty shocking statistics about how badly Democrats are likely to do given the president's current approval ratings. Democrats have got a long road to hoe if they want to maintain the Senate, don't they?
Definitely. And, it's important to point out there's a long time from here to November, and a lot can happen, and a lot will be formulated in these primaries that start in just a couple of weeks across the country for Republicans to choose who they nominate in some of these races. But you're right. Historically, the party in power in the second term in the White House in the midterm averages a loss of at least 6 seats in the Senate since 1914. So, that's an average, and it's setting up for Republicans to take the majority. They need 6 for the majority. I do think there's a lot that can happen. Republicans could have taken the Senate in 2010 and 2012, but didn't.
Yeah. Hey, Bret, on the domestic front again, the president's had a rough week here with the CBO, rough couple of weeks, actually, between Obamacare and the minimum wage estimates. Any pushback against the CBO and the D.C. circles for putting out these numbers that the minimum wage was going to cost jobs and Obamacare was going to cost millions of work hours?
I don't think there's pushback for doing their job, but there is pushback from the administration about the analysis.
Right, on the politics.
You had Gene Sperling out there saying essentially they're wrong, they don't have all the data. The administration, for the second time in as many weeks, saying that the CBO is kind of screwed up in its nonpartisan analysis of numbers.
Well, you live by the CBO, right? You die by the CBO, right?
Yeah.
And finally, one of the burning issues of our day, what do you think about this?
I set up hip hop, the hipping to the hip hop. You don't stop the.
Now that's Brian Williams in an edited thing that was on Jimmy Fallon the other night. Every one of these words was something from a newscast that he had delivered, and we want to compare that to another version of this done by Bret Baier.
Rock it out, baby mama to the boogie is back.
Now, Bret, do you have any advice for Brian? I mean, that's a real man doing it in real time, not some slick edit job. Do you have any advice for Brian Williams?
I'm ready for a wrap off anytime. My anchor friend. I'll tell you this: that editor. Holy cow.
We were just saying that.
I made an estimate that was probably a full week's worth of work there. Do you agree?
Definitely.
It's
Definitely.
amazing. It's up to 2 million views on YouTube, right?
Yeah,
it's really strong. It's very, very
it's
strong.
Beautifully edited piece.
Out.
At least as people who've worked in television, we can appreciate that it was a well-done piece of editing. Yeah. All right, listen, Bret Baier, pleasure to have you, buddy.
Thanks, Bret.
He doesn't have to remember the words.
That's right.